So what we're going to cover today is what is the Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy, an overview of this specific strategy, HS5C, Civil Legal Services Eviction Prevention, and how it relates and how it was informed by the implementation plan and by community feedback. An overview of the actual request for proposal and the components within that RFP, giving you information on technical assistance for small organizations. Letting you all know that the basis for applying for this is in Zoom grants, and answering any quick questions you have about that. Most of you have probably had some experience with submitting applications through Zoom grants by now. And any other questions that you come up with, we hope that I have the answers, or we'll get back to you on that. Was that an immediate question? No? Okay. So we start with the Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy. It was passed by the voters in 2017. It generates 10 cents per $1,000 assessed value. It's for 6 years, brings in about $55 to $60 million annually. It is funded into 3 population strategies: veterans, seniors, and vulnerable populations. This particular strategy, HS5C, is funded by all 3 funding streams. There are some strategies within the levy that are solely veterans, solely seniors, solely vulnerable populations. This one, because housing instability hits all populations, and we want to help people sustain housing across all populations, that has funding from all of the 3 funding streams. It derives its authority and its guidance of what it is seeking to fund from the implementation plan. That was drafted and approved by the King County Council in last summer of 2018. And it was developed after the course of dozens and dozens and dozens of community feedback sessions. We would go out and we would ask people, what do we need to know about what's needed in the community? What do we need to know about how services should be structured? What do we need to know and therefore fund about what people see happening there at their level, in their neighborhoods, amongst the services that they provide? Time and again, housing was one of the #1 things that came up at every single community session, which is why housing is such an elevated strategy within the Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy. I think about half the dollars over the entirety of the levy go towards housing.
50% in the first year and 25% over the life of the levy.
Thank you, Adam. Adam was there for the get-go of all the community sessions. He was a guy at all of those dozens of sessions. Then the other thing is that we also heard that prevention is really critical, that there has been a lot of funding in the past, 10 years or so around a homeless response, but what we need to make sure is that we want to prevent people from becoming homeless in the first place. And so that's what this RFP is about. The guardrails are about helping people keep and maintain housing stability. It's what we call primary prevention, in that if people are generally stably housed right now, even if tenuously, even if the budget's tight, we want to help them stay there, because the crisis and the fallout from becoming homeless is so much more from being able to keep people in their housing, or help them maintain housing stability, knowing that housing stability can still mean moving to someplace less expensive, moving to someplace closer to family supports or a neighborhood or a school, or negotiating a move out, so long as you don't have the eviction on your record, because that helps you maintain housing stability for some of the future opportunities that you need to have.
No, sorry about that. I've been taking calls. There you go.
Okay. Some of the guiding principles of the levy are connection between people, between programs, between systems, and between us as contract managers and the partners who we fund. We really embrace a learning culture about this, and it's all about what do we need to know and respond to community need. Even as you are delivering the services out in the community, what do we need to continue to hear so that we can support and structure and use the resources of the levy to do that? One of the things that we are learning is belonging matters. Having a relationship with your neighbor matters. Having that sense of self-determination and respect and community base matters. And so with that, with the funding that comes from the levy, it being fairly flexible, approved by the voters, but not held tight by any federal regulations, we can really do some things that only the levy can do. We can do what we call the combined arms and say, we're going to make a space for you here at our hub model in the senior centers in the veterans program and give you an office to work out of. So there might be some requirements there. But after that, there's no limitations if you're a veteran on your discharge status, which might be the case for some of the federal resources. There's no necessarily income limits, which might be some of the resources or some of the requirements with state or federal dollars. So we can be pretty flexible and we can create connections between programs, connections between the individuals who are served by the served programs, and we are really trying to do a lot to make sure that providers know and work with each other and create open doors to each other, because that's when the magic happens. As Hamdi was reflecting, there's many time organizations that have real strong technical expertise, but their knowledge and connections to some of the most vulnerable communities is limited. Therefore, what we try to do is bring the partners together through some equitable sharing of resources, through some intentional partnerships that help create the system that's stronger for all of us. So speaking of the equity and social justice, to ensure that all people, regardless of who they are and where they live, have the opportunity to thrive with full and equal access to opportunities, power, and resources. In this regard, King County has an initiative called Lead with Race, and that is we proactively acknowledge that institutional racism and barriers have created unequal opportunities for people these past many hundreds of years, and so what we need to do is actively dismantle those barriers, creating opportunities for smaller organizations to apply for this funding, creating an intentionality of ensuring that people have partnerships, that we can bring the small organizations, build their capacity through technical assistance and capacity funds, making sure that they have access to some of the more longer-term providers who established the legal expertise, but who need to have that community connection to get to the neighborhoods and the people who are most vulnerable, who might otherwise have a hard time knowing about or accessing those services. As I was saying, within the levy, there is strategies and a certain code system that the levy is built around. It's built around 5 themes, knowing that to have strong communities and to be living to your full potential, you generally need housing stability, financial stability, well-being, physical, mental health, and behavioral well-being, social engagement and relationships, and that the systems and the services around you are coordinated and working well. So that's HS, housing stability, FS, financial stability, HL, healthy living, SE, social engagement, and SS, systems, strong systems. This one is an HS, housing stability strategy. And then as you can see, it's here we talk about building housing, increasing access to tenancy through leasing, preventing housing loss, promoting home ownership. And so this one here is preventing inappropriate housing loss, making sure that people can stay, retain housing stability through legal aid, civil legal services. So that was the guidance and the guardrails by which this RFP was planned. We did some community planning sessions, again, bringing out to the community, okay, within these guardrails, this is what we're planning to do. Now, what are some of the specifics that we need to know as we plan this RFP? And what we heard is, well, you need to make sure that there's outreach and education for people, because especially with the recent changes in the Landlord Tenant Act, where we went from a 3-day pay or vacate to a 14-day pay or vacate, and the requirements of a very, standard notice. There's a lot of people who aren't aware of their rights and responsibilities. So you need to have outreach and education. You need to have organizations who are well placed in the community, who can step in quickly when some of the emerging signs are bubbling up, and they can help prevent something that might be coming down the line 30, 60, 90 days. But you also want to be available when something is happening in the immediate, when someone does have their notice of pay or vacate, and you're able to respond to that crisis and the urgency of it. We want to make sure that we can have some post-court support, so like what they call the orders of limited dissemination. And that is like, say you are the prevailing party as the tenant, you're the prevailing party in an eviction case. When they pull a tenant report, a credit report or whatever, it still shows that you are a party to an eviction, and so then that can mean that the future landlords will, steer clear of you. What this can do is it can quash, is that the word, or?
It just makes it not reportable when they're doing the evaluation of whether or not you should evaluate.
But it takes an actual application for that to happen. So making sure that we have that available service. Making sure that we have partners who are connected to community resources, the rental assistance dollars, and some of the other, food banks. Like, what else is it going to take to get your household more stable? So we heard all of this in the community planning sessions. We heard make sure that we have small nonprofits connected to civil legal organizations, because it takes both partners to do it well. Or that, make sure that someone can demonstrate that if I'm a small nonprofit, I have in-house civil legal access, or if I'm a civil legal, make sure that you demonstrate that you have the cultural connections. So as you'll see, the narrative questions that got formed, a lot of the framing of that was built around what we heard in the community sessions. This again was the guardrails, what I call the guardrails of the RFP, again, reinforced by what was written into the implementation plan, reinforced by what we heard in the community sessions. The available funding that we'll have over the course through December 31st, 2023 is just over $6 million. There was some services that were in place from last year's levy when it was passed. We had 2018 funding that we had to get out the door, so we had some interim transition plan services that were out there to do some eviction prevention. And since we didn't want services to stop while we were through this RFP process, we sustained those services with some of the 2019 dollars until this RFP can be complete. So that accounts for the dollars that are available. And then because the county operates on a 2-year biennium, this is what the 2-year funding periods, the available dollars. This RFP, the eligibility, is that it is available to community-based organizations, tribe and tribal organizations, public government agencies working in King County, who have proposed to hire or partner with an organization that either has or proposes to hire a Washington State licensed attorney, or, oh, this is not the one that I thought I had up here. I must not have updated it. We'll get to that in a second then. Have demonstrated expertise in the Washington State Landlord-Tenant Act, or can partner with an organization that has that and a clear plan to create that relationship. That they currently serve veterans, seniors, or vulnerable populations, or that they have a clear plan to build that capacity in the near future if awarded funding, and that they can provide culturally specific supports and meaningfully partner with culturally specific providers or equivalent community-based entities. I was just reading from it, but I worded it so well. This RFP will fund programs that include the following services: outreach, assistance with submission of documents, full representation at the eviction proceedings, and referrals to community-based services. And it's not necessarily that each applicant has to provide that full range of services within their own service portfolio. But what they should be able to demonstrate is that they have connections to those services. Like, we pick it up from here to here, and we have a partnership with someone else who will pick it up from here to here, and we have a partnership with someone else who will pick it up from here to here, so that their clients can receive the breadth of that, even if they have an area of expertise. As we spoke about connections, we have a phrase for it in the implementation plan, combined arms. It's a military term, but it means bringing partners together who have areas of expertise and who deploy that area, that expertise, in succession, so that together you have something that's greater than the sum of the parts. What we have learned as we've been doing this model for the last couple of years as our test is that it's a lot of work, but with a lot of gains. You begin to create relationships, and so that when I call someone, they see my name at the end of the line, they pick up the call. I'm saying this is the longest provider, not because I have the hats of the contract manager that people are trying to keep happy. But, so it's like, okay, so when I see Gretchen, I know that I've worked with Gretchen before, and we have a really good relationship, and we're gonna share our clients, and we're gonna be promoting the client's best interests together. It requires, though, that we have regular presence with each other so that we begin to get to know each other, that we know each other's eligibility criteria, the handoff protocol, and that we both have a certain attitude about it, that we're flexible, but we're also assertive. This is what needs to happen. We're going to stand up for the best services, but we have some give and take, and we offer a lot of grace because there will be bumps in the road. We've been experiencing that too, but we learn and we grow together through that. And a commitment to frequent and transparent communication. Just, you know, hey, I've had trouble getting my person through the door on this. Has something changed? Oh, well, we've lost a staff person. Okay, well, let us know. Can we come in and do a cross training with your folks so that you understand who we are and how to do a good referral? It's really about the intentionality. The other things about in the contracts that you will be seeing as a successful applicant is that there's the King County boilerplate. There's a very standard draft exhibit, and within the exhibit, it has all this is what you need to do as part of this partnership collective. You need to have, you know, partner with the senior centers or the veterans programs, depending upon which funding stream you get. You'll need to really demonstrate a commitment to equity and social justice, as borne out by attending some of our cultural competency trainings, as borne out by showing us how you're using data of your client services to inform how you continue to deliver and learn from your services. Everybody has to do an evaluation plan, and again, it's not about tracking widgets of services, but a tracking learning and program improvement. Data collection reporting, we have moved towards client level data through what we call the core. Do you know what core stands for?
Ooh, it's putting me on the spot here.
It's a centralized data system, and so it's for those who might have had services in the past where you just collect or you report. I served 23 clients this quarter from zip codes, 5 from zip code this, 7 from zip code that. Now we are reporting at a client level. Like I saw Eviction from 98177, and she was so many years old and had a household this size. And you upload that data into the core central database, or it's encrypted and very highly secured. Or you could do data integration from your own database, making sure that you are collecting the data elements that are required, and we would help you with the migration of that data. Other contract requirements, being a part of the network, attending the trainings, attending meetings that we may have, participating in continuous quality improvement. There is a wage survey and client satisfaction survey, again, all about system improvement, and the wage surveys in there is because we know that nonprofits typically have not been able to pay prevailing wages, and we want to be able to elevate that and daylight that so that we can create some awareness, and as we go over time, agencies themselves can become aware of what is a fair and prevailing wage and talk about that as part of their grant application, and they're striving to pay, the higher wages, and it becomes a self-reinforcing loop that we can grow the capacity of the nonprofit organizations. The dates for this, the RFP was released on November 21st, bidders conference today. It's open for 6 weeks, actually even 7 weeks. We put it a week past the close of the holiday time when RFPs are due. In between, small organizations who would like technical assistance in writing a grant application or helping to review your grant application to make sure that it's adequately responds to the questions and is competitive, are eligible to apply for TA, and there's a listing of the TA providers both in the RFP and on Zoom grants and on this tables. We will be maintaining a frequently asked questions. We're going to take any questions that we get here today, type them up, and post them as an FAQ to the Zoom grants. And we'll continue to do that on a weekly basis during this open period up until December 30th. That's the final day to submit questions. And the reason we do it that way is so that I have time to respond to them, get them uploaded, and we make sure that everybody has the same information unilaterally across all partners. We have panelists coming together in mid to late January to review the proposals. It will include subject matter experts, local community planners, local nonprofit providers, those who have the lived experience, and other areas of subject matter expertise. Generally, we have about a dozen to 15 panelists, and each one reviews between 5 and 6 applications. And it's really a wonderful, thoughtful process, and we are getting more people involved in it. And it is informing and it's improving our ability to manage and monitor these as well, because it really helps us get closer to the community and the review. As needed, we'll have interviews with the finalists or the recommended finalists from the panel, because sometimes as we review these, we see like, oh, I didn't quite understand this. Can you go check out this element? If, you know, this is the sort of thing that I want to be understanding that they were proposing, but if not, are they willing to provide that? Or sometimes we are not able to fund the full ask, and we go back and we say, well, there's only so many dollars in this pot. If we were funding you at this level, how would you be able to scale your proposal? So that's some time that we might have interviews, notification of award decisions, and the anticipated contract start date of April 1st. The reason for that date is remember I mentioned there are some stopgap services so that we didn't, so that we can continue these services in the community until this RFP is complete. Well, there's a 1-month overlap, so if by chance anyone who's a current applicant was not selected for renewed funding, they'd have time to hand off their named clients so that clients aren't left high and dry during this transition. This RFP, the deadline was 11:59 on January 9th. Complete submittals will include the response to summary questions, the response to narrative questions, copy on your table, and the budget. The points are like this. You would notice that scale also on the narrative questions. It's replicated there, so it would be more meaningful if you're looking at the narrative question document on your table. And going forward, if you know of someone who would be a really good reviewer who does not have a conflict of interest with you or your organization, we would welcome their name. Again, we're trying to diversify who we have as panelists. As I said, this is who the folks will be. This is another reference to the technical assistance that might be available if you think you're eligible. All you have to do is make that phone call yourself based on the phone numbers that are there in that attachment. Materials are in Zoom Grants. There is, in Zoom Grants, videos and self-help videos of how to use it, how to log in, and how to create an application. Yes?
And the technical assistance providers can help you do that too.
Ah, okay. And any questions? Contact us with a caveat. Because this is a live RFP, we are in what we call the blackout period of communication. I can't respond to any particular person for their very specific question, but what we can do is that when you go through Zoom Grants and you submit a question, then I can collect those questions, answer them in whole, and put them in the FAQ so that everybody benefits. So there is that kind of communication, even if there's not direct communication. So let's go through the materials that are on your table and see if it generates any questions from you. I've made these to share because I'm trying to save a few trees. The first, yes, Adam?
I just want to, whenever you're done, I want to go through the phones, who's on Skype, just to make sure that they get recorded in a call so we can capture their information.
Thank you. Okay. Shall we do that now?
Sure, yeah. So, folks on the Skype call, sorry for the delayed start. I'm going to call out a few names, and then if there are some people that are joining us by phone and not Skype, so if you could identify yourself. So I'll start here. I see we have Mi Young Lee is on the phone as well. Mi, would you mind introducing yourself? And hopefully they'll. Maybe not. We also have Julie Wilchins. Julie, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Julie with United Indians of All Tribes Foundation. Oh, I am talking, but maybe you can't hear me.
I'm going to work on this for just a second then. See if I can get this to come through. Okay. All right, so let's try it again. Julie, could you introduce yourself again?
Yes, this is Julie with United Indians of All Tribes Foundation.
Okay, well, I'll go through the names, and even though we can't hear you right now, I'll try and work on the audio here. We have Jerry Kroon from Eastside Legal Assistance Program, Francois Melingano, Adam, and we have several guests on the phone line. I'll try and work on the audio so we can get it to pump through your speakers here. But I just wanted to call out those folks. And if you do have questions for those on Skype, please try and type in the Skype function call, and I'll try and get the phone line up. Julie Wilchins, by the way, is from United Indians of All Tribes Foundations. Yeah, so now you go on with your thing, and I'll try and see if I can get them to come through the phone.
I realized that there's one document that I wanted to really touch from for this conversation. It was my working notes that I typed up after I had the community planning sessions, and it was what I called my guardrail document. And so this will help you as you're reading all the voluminous documents in front of you, and as you read the RFP, to go like, okay, this is a lot of information here. What really matters? So again, the concept is that this program will fund an entity or entities to provide not-for-profit or pro bono legal services to advise and represent veterans, seniors, and vulnerable populations in civil legal matters which may result in a loss of housing or other related legal matters with the housing nexus. That's a lot of words, but the ones to pick out from that are not-for-profit pro bono legal services, civil legal matters, meaning it can't be criminal justice. Like say you are in jail and you are going to have trouble paying your rent. Well, you can't represent the landlord so that the landlord will accept rent from another community partner so that they don't lose their apartment upon exit. That, if I was able to explain that well. Or other related legal housing nexus. So some folks have said, well, can I help someone clear up their DUI so that they can get their truck driver's license? No, not so much, because that is not demonstrably related to their housing. But if they have, say, been stably housed, and now they've just gotten hit with a child support garnishment, that suddenly they've lost $500 paycheck, and now that puts their housing at risk, where they were normally able to sustain that housing that you could address. Typically what this is it's about a change in circumstance that requires a legal intervention. The next thing is that this is primary prevention. We're not trying to, in the world of homelessness, it's called diversion, preventing people from entering the shelter system. We are going further upstream from that. We can go, it doesn't have to be, this is not homelessness prevention, this is housing stabilization. And let me just check everybody's eyes that distinction makes sense here? Okay.
Not really, but no, it doesn't.
So sometimes in homeless prevention, what they want to do is to see that you have your 3-day pay or 14-day or pay vacate. It's 1 day before that ends, and you will be out on the street if you don't solve this one. And that not only will you not be, that you'll be on the street, but you have nowhere to go after that, and you'll have to go to the shelter system. They want to see it so close to the bone that they know they're preventing homelessness. Well, we know that whether you ended up in the shelter system or not, you would have had life upheaval. Your kids might have had to change schools. You will have lost your network in your community. And so we are not so concerned about whether you enter the shelter system, but whether your life goes into upheaval because you have the potential to lose your housing. So we can go a little further upstream. We can also do things that demonstrate the likelihood of losing your housing. Like if you've had the change in circumstances where suddenly, you had a partner who you're going through a divorce and what's happening, or you're going through a DV situation and you need to get out of your lease because you can no longer afford it on a single income. And what you need to do is have someone help negotiate your terms your way out of this lease. Okay, anyway, it's going upstream and very often related to a change of circumstances. Again, where the remedy is civil legal. Examples of issues that can put a renter's housing at risk with a civil legal resolution are negotiated settlements. Housing discrimination, requests for reasonable accommodations that a landlord is refusing to allow. Repairs and habitability, what can also happen frequently is someone will request a repair, and because the landlord doesn't want to make it, even if it's a code issue, will instead give someone, notice of vacate and termination just because they just don't want to deal with it. Well, there's opportunities to say, no, these repairs do need to be made, and civil legal recourses to make sure that that happens. Or that you don't get evicted because you requested a repair and the landlord just didn't want to deal with you. Yes?
I have a question. Like, it's a tax credit unit, and they had assigned to people, and somebody was about to move into the apartments and parked in the wrong space. The tow truck, the owner of the parking called the tow truck for that person who was about it. They had no money. They come out and they saw that their car is being towed. They cannot afford it, so that it comes to an issue where the whole neighborhood comes out. The person gets inside their car and says, "You're not towing my car." They don't know their rights even. All the police come, almost 8 cars came. The police says, "Hey, we cannot interfere as long as no problem happens. You can be in your car, and you are not going to move with her being inside the car because that's a safety issue." So everything became stuck. The whole community came together. But at the end, when there is no way out, an elderly person asked the whole community to collect the money and give the tow truck. Because the landlord gave the permission to tow their car. So issues like that, with this kind of support we use.
If it become like a lawsuit for disobedience, or at least
It became like eviction.
or at least
If you
violation.
if you don't pay this, we will be evicting you.
Okay,
So
yes.
they were like, either have to pay the 500 or they will be evicted. It
Yeah.
was all.
So if it becomes an issue of eviction and lease violation, yes, this sort of assistance, someone who would come in and help mediate, negotiate a response, or figure out how to find the community resources, couple them together to respond to it, yes. Let me get this one thing. Another example that I heard through the community planning sessions is a family who had a 17-year-old who the property manager didn't like. And so on the day that this 17-year-old turned 18, they submitted a notice of termination of tenancy because this kid was not on the lease. And they said, well, he's not on the lease and I'm not willing to put him on the lease, so I'm going to terminate your tenancy. And that was clearly a case of discrimination. And so that was the sort of thing that was able to be addressed through civil legal services. So housing discrimination, reasonable accommodations, say that you are rejoining family members and you want your brother or someone else to join you to become part of your household and the landlord doesn't want to allow it. That can be one of those things that can be covered through this. Anything that requires asserting your rights, reasonable things, is something that can be covered. Adam.
So we got a question from Skype from Julie with the United Indians of All Tribes. Julie asks, for community-based organizations that don't have lawyers on staff, could you please elaborate on what information you'd like to see in the application about our plans to partner with agencies who may have lawyers?
So a reference that we have created, or we are creating a relationship with such and such organization, and they are aware of it. We've been in conversation already and see that reflected in the other partners' application as well, that together the two of you, it doesn't have to be so far as a written MOA, but that you reference each other in your application, or that you really specifically detail a process by which you will find that type of partner.
Okay.
And I'll say that as one who used to be a community-based provider, not a lawyer, providing information on the Landlord-Tenant Act, this is how you get your deposit back. I began to learn that I was practicing law without a license and I was really far past what I should have been doing. And so what you need to do is just make sure that you're covered in that area, that you are being guided and informed by a civil legal attorney who helps you understand when and how to say, which things and stay within the boundaries of what your role is.
Okay.
But making sure that you've articulated where that is or plan to develop that.
And I heard you mention like referencing two separate applications. Are they allowed to partner in one application, or would you prefer they both apply in separate applications?
We've had differing answers to that in our Levy RFPs. It can be whichever works better for the organizations.
Okay.
Typically, though, when it gets down to it, we'll contract separately so that each organization gets their equitable share of the resources so that there's real transparency there. But we've also had instances where an organization is so small that it was going to be hard for them to meet the insurance requirements, and then the other one held them as a subcontractor. But what it is all about is the transparency and the explicit understanding of who the partners are, which services they're delivering within that continuum, and how the resources are being equitably shared.
Okay, thank you.
So to make sure that I understand the answer of the question, if a legal group want to apply for this application, and I want to apply for this as well, that's possible. We can have a relationship, working relationship, whatever, I will ask them, hey, I want you to help me with this and this and this. If we agree that we can still both apply for this application.
Yes. The services, again, the suite of services that we're seeking to make sure that we have covered is outreach and education. Proactive services, the ability to identify people as they are teetering on the edge of housing instability and be able to step in quickly so that things don't further cascade downhill. But also reactive services so that if things really are on that edge, we can still step in and save the day and make sure that they don't go through the eviction or get the eviction on their record. Civil legal advice and representation to mediate other activities, the reasonable accommodations, adding someone to the lease, getting someone off the lease, streamlined access to rental and financial assistance and other community-based services, connections to address other root causes, and post-quote supports, again, the one that I mentioned, orders of limited dissemination. The targeted populations that we're seeking to serve are those who don't know their rights, so they don't know what they are or how they can assert them to uphold their rights when it comes to getting into housing and keeping housing, who have difficulty asserting their rights due to race, culture, language, age, disability, trauma, or lack of privilege, who face known and historic barriers to fair and affordable and habitable housing, who have experienced a circumstance that more or less has some level of predictability that a reasonable person would identify that their housing could be at risk, and who, if they are able to assert their rights, are able to maintain housing stability, again, making sure that you understand that it's not only for that exact same housing, but some housing that suits their needs in a way that in their community of their choosing. Or those who have, we're helping people who have conflict or potential conflict with the landlord or property management, and there's room for mediation or enforcement, and whose situation is resolvable with a favorable outcome of housing retention, housing stability, or improved habitability that suits their individual circumstances. Any other questions from those who are on Skype?
Yeah, we've got the audio working too, so if anyone on the phone call wants to join in and just shout out a question, please do.
Can you go to the funding table? Or wait, do I have that?
I can put it on right now if you'd like the available funding.
Yes. So we steer clear of saying these are the limits of what you can ask for, because we know that organizations need to respond to what their staffing and their program needs are. And so we don't have, no more than 50,000. We don't have that kind of limitation of counts. But we do ask that you recognize that we need to serve all of King County, South County, East County, City of Seattle, that we have a range of services. And so asks need to be reasonable while being responsive to what it takes a program to provide these services.
So I have a question. Okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that chart is different from what was distributed earlier. The numbers are a little bit different.
In the RFP, you're saying?
Yes, this, where'd you get this from, today or earlier? Did you print out the RFP and came with this?
Yeah.
This, okay, I'm glad you did that. In the RFP, I had a math error and I didn't account for the carryover of dollars to keep services going until I conclude the RFP. So it has been amended, and this is an amendment that's posted into Zoom grants, and this is the updated funding table.
And then that number includes the money that it's distributed.
Yes, that accounts for it. So the crossed out, the difference between the crossed out figure and the new figure is the money that it took to sustain services until April 30th, when I anticipate that this RFP will be concluded and new contracts will be in place.
So to clarify, this is the most recent table that we have on the call right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a question just as a personal
Yes.
interest. What are the boundaries on technical assistance? Like if I am thinking about applying, what do I need to know to get that stuff?
So technical assistance for application assistance is limited to small organizations, which means fewer than 20 FTE. So if you have 24 people who work for you, but 10 of them are part-time people, then you likely fit the less than 20 FTE, because it's based on the hours worked, and an annual budget of less than $4 million. And it's an and, not an or. But with that, then the small organizations are available, can access the technical assistance. And again, they won't write it for you, but they will help read and help you shape and understand a competitive response. Like, oh, this is what you're trying to say. This is how it could be better expressed. Oh, one thing that I always try to say during these is when you write your answers into Zoom grants, it's much easier to start in your Word document, copy and paste it into Zoom grants later. But also don't feel like you need to make the case for why these services need to be provided. We already know why they need to be provided. It was part of the community planning sessions. It was part of the RFP write-up. We are already well committed to the need for this. What we're trying to hear from you is how you will be responding to the service provision and your expertise and ability to provide it.
The literature, and you speak, you use the term organizations and entities. Does that include sole proprietorships that have, like basically that consist of a team? In other words, it's a sole proprietorship is the ownership premise, but which is owned by one person, but but the entity, if you want to call a sole proprietorship an entity, has a team of people, that are part of it. Is that included or not, or does it behoove someone or someone who's in the form of a sole proprietorship to to make that transition into a nonprofit corporation?
Oh, you lost me with that last sentence, because that's almost what the answer I was going to give you. Adam, can we go to
Hold on, let me get you back on PowerPoint here.
eligible applicants?
Yeah, eligible.
This is intended to fund not-for-profit or pro bono legal assistance. So as long as what the entity is doing is directing people to a pro bono attorney, then that could work. I'll have to get the final answer on that, but
So now, I guess
there.
let me ask mine. So when you use the term, when the literature uses the term entity and organizations, it doesn't exclude sole proprietorships, I assume. Or I don't know, that's what I'm asking actually.
We have before, I know that we've said like a single individual is not an eligible applicant. A single lawyer with his or her own attorney shop, is not an eligible applicant. But if there was law firm, but it was really focused on pro bono legal assistance, or what we will do is help people tap into the pro bono hours that our law firm provides, or not-for-profit, but that's the, do I have? Will fund advocacy, not-for-profit, and pro bono legal services. That is what's written into the implementation plan. That's what's been approved by the county council, and that is what I have to adhere to.
So what is pro bono?
Pro bono is another word for free legal assistance. It's typically lawyers volunteer their time.
There are a lot of sole proprietorships, like the attorney that I work with, Jenny Conklin, who, like, for the last 18 months, we've probably done $150,000 with pro bono legal services, okay? But that doesn't, so that obviously matches that aspect of what is referenced here, but it's still a little unclear to us because the term entity and organization isn't defined all that well. It's a little bit blurry in terms of whether or not that would include us, whether it's sole proprietorship that has a team basically working under that sole proprietorship and is engaged in this type of work is eligible, or whether they should, which we're looking at an option of like basically incorporating as a
I'm going to have to go back to the author of the implementation plan, who really tracked the development of the language and shepherding it through the council approval, and
so you can explain
this
past
out.
this language, okay? Yeah, because it's
I don't have the
clear.
background
It's a little
myself
less
to
than clear.
understand the nuances. I can
Well,
just read the exact words.
It's the difference between being eligible, being clearly eligible to apply in the form you're in or not, and having to make some sort of a translation. So it's an important question, certainly for us.
This will be answered in the first FAQ that gets written up from this meeting, and it will be posted within about 4 to 5 days. So you'll have an answer on that one soon. Adam?
I'd also say if you're eligible, talk to one of the TA providers, and their whole part of their job is making sure you're eligible before you start applying too, and they can work with us and ask questions more intimately than I think we can in this situation here as well. So I think it's just a good plug again to engage with those folks.
So again, going back to the pro bono thing, pro bono means free legal. Is that what it means?
Volunteer attorney time.
Volunteer. So if for this funding, the attorneys will not be paid. Does that mean? Well, the attorneys will not be paid. Is that what it means?
So there are nonprofit attorneys. So some of the ones that are in town that do eviction prevention, there are nonprofit attorneys, and they are paid as part of a nonprofit organization. And so we have some of them here in the room with us today. There are also for-profit attorneys who are just like being attorney in the regular thing, but they like to do some good work sometime on their own time. And they're like, oh, for that, I'm going to volunteer as an attorney and use my legal expertise so I can do some good in the community. And so a lot of attorneys do a certain amount of volunteer hours, and that's their pro bono hour. Did I explain that well enough to those who have a background?
And it should be pointed out that the Washington State Bar Association that licenses all the attorneys in the state, they encourage and promote, that kind of community service, to be performed by attorneys, and many attorneys routinely do it. It's part of their regular affairs.
Right.
Believe it or not. Yeah.
Anything else?
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, great. Hi, this is Catherine Valenti. I am one of those aforementioned trustee technical assistance providers. One is a request. If there are any more questions, if you could repeat the question, it's hard to hear them sometimes. And the other thing I would just sort of add in there is that just an additional piece, and it might be relevant to this conversation, for technical assistance, there is a size limitation, FTEs and budget, as Gretchen said. But if you're a smaller organization partnering with a larger organization, we can provide support to you under that sort of piece of the umbrella. So just a piece of clarification on the parameters of assistance, and it may or may not apply to the pro bono piece. So that's all I had. Thanks.
So clarify the questions when you get them, and partnerships are encouraged that way.
Yes. If you submit the application as a formal partnership, like this is one application for these partners, and if just one of your partners is a small organization, this is what Catherine is saying, you are still eligible for the technical assistance for that.
Absolutely.
Adam, you have sat through a lot of these. Anything I've missed in general that you think is worth highlighting for folks?
I think in these RFPs, for people who have or have not applied before, we can't fund you if you don't ask for the money. So don't try and anticipate what a review panel is going to cut or not cut. Ask for what you need, and the review panel will adjust from there on. So that's the first thing I want to always encourage, because I always feel like I get applications in and people have tried to game it in some way and figure out how they can be a part of it. If we have to make a tough choice, we can do that. Don't do it for us. The other thing is that, as Catherine called out, and I as the person who's very intimate with the technical assistance or application assistance providers, it's better to engage with them and ask a couple questions ahead of time than to kind of try and figure out, is what Gretchen asking, or is she trying to get us to talk about this, or is she trying to get us to talk about that? They are helpful at reading the tea leaves, so I want to encourage that as well. And the other piece is really, if the RFP is silent about something, or if we don't explicitly dictate something that you must do, then I would say that's an open lane for you to say, okay, this is a great opportunity for us to promote whatever in our application. I have this vision for something that I really want to do, and it's not explicitly, denied in the RFP, so therefore it's eligible. That's the way these are written, and that's the way the review panel is going to look at them as well.
With the housing nexus.
With a housing nexus, yeah. But I mean, you called it out, right? You call it out in the RFP, So I would just say don't try and, again, like if we haven't explicitly said you cannot do this, then I'd say it's eligible to be considered. And if we explicitly call it out, I would make sure and feature that in your RFP. But yeah, those are the main things. And ask questions now, because Gretchen can't talk to you later.
Catherine, I'm glad you're on the phone. I'm hoping you're hearing me now. You have been very valuable before in reading RFPs and seeing what's immediately confusing that didn't look confusing to me when I wrote it, but you are able to see what's confusing to people when they read it. Is there anything in the RFP that you think should be clarified right now?
Well, thanks for putting me on the spot there, Gretchen.
Sorry. There's a compliment to put it in there.
Hope you did your homework, yeah.
Not immediately, but I reserve the right to get back to you on that.
And again, application assistance is free. They are paid already. Do not worry about using their time too much.
And one last question. Can you define vulnerable population?
So Catherine, we have a question in the room, or anybody on the phone. We have a question in the room. Please define vulnerable populations, vulnerable communities. I am typically associated with the funding stream for the veterans contract, so that's harder for me to define. I know that the definition is quite broad, because what we want to do is reach people who need help. But that said, we want to reach those who are really facing a lot of barriers. So immigrants, refugees, people whose language is not English as their first language, those who are survivors of domestic violence. Another phrase that we're using these days is resilient communities, because the vulnerable populations has a bit of a negative connotation. It's focusing on the deficits instead of the assets. Adam, I think that I've heard you use some definitions that are more palatable and understandable.
Yeah, so just on this is the area of funding that gets the most spread, because at any point in time, one of us can experience moments of vulnerability or a period of time of vulnerability. That's the way that this definition is set up. If in the eligibility section Gretchen calls out, and particularly this population, it might behoove you to recognize that as well in your application. But the definition of vulnerable populations is extremely broad and meant to reference and capture people who have experienced marginalization through their identity, through their walk through life, through something in their life. It is not meant to say you are permanently a vulnerable population or you are never eligible to be a vulnerable population. And that's why I think if you look at the ordinance that sets up the levy, it's a paragraph and a half. It takes up 2 pages basically. But I would say just pay attention to, in that eligibility criteria, any call-outs Gretchen has made in that population. And if she hasn't made any call-outs, I think that there could be a reasonable argument for why a particular person you want to focus on could be vulnerable at some point or another. But that is just one funding line in the whole thing. It's not the entire funding. Do you want me to show Zoom grants while we have the thing in now?
Yes, please do.
Okay, I'll pull it up for us. So here's what it looks like. It's a little small, but whenever you see it in person, it should be a little bit bigger. One thing I would call out, and it's really whited out here, but there's actually some hidden buttons up here. It'll look gray on your screen, so this is kind of blown out, but these just feature little areas of the application that are the blocks of text down below, and the one that's most important is this button here. It says Contact Admin. That generates an email to Gretchen. Use this to ask questions or to seek clarification if you couldn't get it from the application assistant or you're not eligible. As you scroll down this page, I'm going to call out one other big area, and that's this thing right here. It's called the library. This is where the FAQs are going to go up. This is where the YouTube video for the bidders conference that we're recording right now will go up, and any addendums or amendments, as you'll notice here, she's had an amendment already, will go up. Finally, as we go down through, that's all the content of the RFP, but your place where you're going to contribute is in these blue tabs halfway down the page. There are summary questions. You can click on these tabs and it'll generate new questions below. There are narrative questions, that is the majority of the scoring here. And you can scroll down and see whether it's a text block. And again, it's kind of whited out because of the screen we're on here, but it'll be more obvious. And then just the thing to know that I always like to say is that this system auto saves. So you've created your account, you're working your way through, and you'll see a green button that says saving flash up on the screen. It should go away after a while. If it does not, simply refresh the page and your answer should be saved from there. But it's an auto-saving thing, so as soon as you type in an answer, click off the box, it'll save it, and then you can close your browser and pick it up at another time. So that's the basics I want to really call out about that.
It would be helpful when you do the contact admin, it populates like an Outlook email, and it looks as though, when it comes to me, it looks as though you are emailing me. And sometimes I lose sight of those because I think it's just emailing me. But, you know, so if you can make the such apply, HS5C FAQ, that will flag to me that this is something that I can and should answer as part of my FAQ.
Questions on Zoom grants?
Okay. So January 9th is the big date we need to remember. December 30th, last day to ask questions through FAQs. December 20th, last day to ask for technical assistance. And gave that, it's 3 weeks away, which is typical during the life cycle of a RFP, even though it's earlier this time, but that was because we had to allow for vacations and people being unavailable, making sure that you've given the technical assistance providers enough time to be responsive and supportive of your applications.
This is Bonnie Olson. I just wanted to mention one thing. Regarding that date of December 20th, that's the deadline to initiate the request so that you can partner up with one of the TA providers. But we will be able to help you after that while you're preparing your application up to the due date. We would like to.
Yeah, don't reach out to them with 24 hours notice. You must respond. Please don't. Yeah.
But that was why that date was set, was so that there is still time to help craft and work on your application.
Yep.
Thank you all. Appreciate your coming out.
Thank you.